We are in Shaa'r base, Perek Dalet of the Nefesh HaHaim, and we're investigating a certain point about kavanot hatfilah. When you're davening, where should you place the objective? We've talked about aspects of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that he is nistar mitzad atzmo and nigle mitzad maisav. Hashem has an unknowable self. God's essence is for sure unknowable to man and to any being except for God. And yet God appeared to the Jewish people. He created the world, which was a great expression of his will and his handiwork, so we can know a little bit about him from the world. And then he gave us the Torah. He spoke to us in Mount Sinai, and we all do have a sense of knowing God. And so we have to do a little bit of detail work here in Jewish philosophy of sorting out our kavana. We said already 2 weeks ago in an earlier chapter that every bracha mentions both aspects. We begin with Baruch Atah Hashem. We speak to God in the second person because we do have this sense of I and thou, and he's here and I'm here. And yet we conclude the bracha with Asher Kiddushanu b'mitzvosav in the third person, that we're speaking about another party who in a sense is not here, because God's essence is extending down into this world, but we're not speaking it to in the second person. So these two aspects are present really in everything. And we're now talking about, let's say, davening. And we saw particularly in the Haggah, in the comment, that the Kabbalists, and this is not something that any of us really do because we're just not on this level, but the Kabbalists are focusing on different spheres in different brachas or different mitzvahs. When they do this mitzvah, they're thinking about the sphere of chesed and this one. And you could see it in the Siddur, right? In the Siddur, it's in Hilchos Sfiras HaOmer, right, where it says the first night is Chesed Shebechesed, and the second night is Gvura Shebechesed, and the second week is Gvura, and so forth. So we do have a reference to different aspects on the different spheres, even in the Siddur that we all have. But for most of us, it's over our head of, trying to focus our prayer on a certain sphere. But we're going one step past it. The Nefesh HaHaim is asking a kasha and making a point. You're not allowed to pray to the spheres, okay? And there's a Ramban who mentions it also in the Ten Commandments when it says, "Thou shalt have no other gods before me." Lo yelech Elohim acherim. So that includes not only eitz va'even, having an idol made of stone or wood, but if you would even single out an angel or even a divine attribute and say, I'm worshiping this divine attribute, I'm worshiping the Midas HaChesed because I want God to be really merciful to me, to give me chesed. So I'm praying to the Midas HaChesed. So that's also an Isra Avodah Zarah. You can't do that, okay? Because you're being mafrid. You're separating, an aspect of God from his everythingness, okay? That he's all one and he's completely a unified being and a unified entity. So you can't break stuff off. And the term we saw that they use for that is koitzitz benetiyos, that you're like cutting off stuff from its roots. You can't cut things off from the root. The root is God's essence, and that's where we're focused. Now, it gets complicated because the Nefesh HaHaim brought the Divrei Chazal that spoke about God's essence as lo ichpas le lekud shebrichu im nishchot mi'atzavar o min ha'oref. Okay, that God's unknowable essence is beyond interaction, or predilection, or like sort of even caring. They use that language, ma ichpas le. What does he care if we do mitzvahs or not? If we eat treifer kosher? If we shecht from the front or the back? I mean, does God really care? And again, Chazal, are talking about that philosophical position that there's aspects of God who just doesn't care about anything because he's unto himself and he's perfect and unchanging. and there's nothing that anybody could do that would affect him. So that I'm going to use that as a philosophical given, okay, an axiom that the perfect being is unchanged by anything any other being will do, okay?
You're
So
describing a man.
a man, why a man?
They fight off change, uh, as opposed to a woman. Stubborn. So the fellow with the indications of the spherot and the Siddur,
Yeah,
how is he juggling these things?
yeah, Fad. So that's where I'm going. I'm
Okay,
building a kasha in
all
order
right.
to resolve it. So on the one hand, we're not allowed to dive into the spheres, okay? On the other hand, to dive into the Ein Sof Baruch Hu is like you're diving into someone that doesn't care and is unaffected. So how could that be? So we're at a little bit of a conundrum here that if we go to the right or the left, this isn't going to work. And so the answer, and this again, the way I understand it, and I think it's right here in the text in front of us, is what we're doing is we're davening to Ein Sof Baruch Hu behischabruso el haolamois. God's unknowable essence elected to connect himself to the creation. He did. He created. And he said he wants to be here. He talked to us and he gave us mitzvahs. So he has decided that he does care. And he is connecting up with us. And he's going to reward us for doing good and punish us for doing bad. So he's invested in us. And that aspect of himself that he is invested in us, in the world, again, we're calling that his chabruso, his connecting up to the worlds. That's our focal point. That's how I understand it, okay? Because again, either side of it doesn't work. If you dive into someone doesn't care, so that seems like a waste of time. And if you dive into one of the officers, one of the emissaries, one of the emanations, then you're praying to a singular, separate being, and that's also for sure no good. So where the focal point for our prayers and our service is Ein Sof Baruch Hu behischabruso le'olamos. Okay, it becomes a little bit awkward, but I think that's where we have to be, and that's definitely what the Nefesh HaHaim is talking about, and that's pretty much what he's saying here. So let me get back into the text to say this, that where he says these words. Okay. L'chein makdimim ata Hashem melech ha'olam, okay. And hu mamaram zal imras Hashem tzrufa amarav lo nitnu mitzvahs el letzaref ki ma ichpas le lekut shabrichu. That's what we talked about. What would he care unto himself? And so where are we going with this after this Hagah? Ela shekol kavanas libenu b'chol habrachos v'atfilos. So where are we aiming? What is the focal point for our brachas and our tfilos? Tzarich shetiyeh la'atzmus ein sof baruch hu mitzad hischabroi kiretzoino yizbarach el ha'olamos. It's a mouthful, but again, it's sort of imperative, because if it were just the Ein Sof, then Kavayachli doesn't care, and if it's just to the Spherois, then it's too low. You've undershot it, and you're praying to a specific force, and you can't do that. So we gotta dive into Atzmus Ein Sof Baruch Hu Mitzad Hischabro Kiretzoino Yizbarach El Ha'olamos Shemitzidam Hem Kol HaToarim VeHaShemois Nischalfim Lif'ol VeLahamshich Behem Or VeShefas Kedusha Me'atzmuso Yizbarach Kefi Hisoirus HaMagia Aleim Mima'asei Ha'odam Shekol Ish Me'am Skula. So these pathways, this I guess juncture, I sort of pictured it in my mind as like a pipeline where Ein Sof Baruch Hu connects up to the finite universes that he created at this high place, and that's where we're focused on. He decided to do this, and that decision connects him to the Bria and gives us permission to pray to him and to serve him, and we are his chosen nation, and he gave us tasks to do. We have mitzvahs and ma'asim tovim, and he told us to pray and to make brachas. And so this is where we're focused. We are bringing more of Ein Sof Baruch Hu. We're bringing from the infinite down into the finite. He's given us that capacity to impact this relationship between the unknowable, infinite aspect of God and the knowable, immanent aspect of his hashgacha of our world. Okay, so that's like our task. That's what our prayers and brachas and our voda are about. Im bechesed, im b'mishpat, im b'tzedakah, im berachamim, hama'at im rav, a lot or a little, to the left or to the right, whatever we're going to do. Are we doing mitzvahs of chesed or are we doing mitzvahs of din? Kacha hu al zeh ha'oifen v'yashiur b'dikduk atzum, b'mida b'mishkal. Inyan hischabru so yizbarach el ha-koichois v'oilamois. Lishanot seder hiskashrusam l'hamshachas shefas oiram. So we're talking about God influxing his divine light into his created universe, and it's all based on the deeds of man. So man like has this dial, like we can change the volume or the speed or the amount of divine energy that's flowing into the world from the infinite source into the finite kalim of the oilamos and the spheros and everything. And it's all being controlled b'mishkal, b'mida, by the deeds of man. So we have this we're at the control panel of the connection, even kaviyachol within the divinity, okay? Because the spheros are, like in the oilam atzilos, they're part of the divinity. And yet it's impacted by the deeds of man. They're called prate hanhagatam, how we behave. Im ledin v'rogez, im lechesed v'rachamim. V'gam shi'ur hadin, v'achesed hama'at im rav. Will it go to the left or will it go to the right, to a great degree or to a lesser degree? All of those decisions, all of those determinations are going to be affected by the deeds of man, which is, again, remarkable and gives us a tremendous amount of power to impact what's going on in all the worlds.
But we're talking individually or as a hamon?
Yeah, good question. But my answer is going to be both, okay? That every individual has impact with what they do, because everybody is at Tselem Elokim. Each one of us is a microcosm of the world and of, and the world is in a microcosm of the divinity, okay? So certainly Klal Yisrael, though, and Klal Yisrael is like Adam Atem. The Jewish people are all considered as if we're one person. So it's true on both levels. The individual has impact, and certainly Klal Yisrael has tremendous impact on this divine flow of energy. And so he's now sort of reinterpreting the Maimer Chazal. Zema shekasu b'mamaram hanal shelo nitna mitzvahs ela litzaref behen es habriyos. What does this mean? That the mitzvahs were given to us to purify man. He's now explaining that it means hainu shetzoyrech gadol hema litzaref ulezakek lahafrid hasigim mikol hakoichos v'oilamos habruim. Yitztaref v'yislaben. So this purification process that is mentioned here in this Maimer Chazal is that not only man is being purified through the mitzvahs, but it's purifying and getting rid of dross through all the oilamos. It's all being cleansed and purified. V'gam kein b'mashma litzaref hainu lechaber. And also litzaref is sort of like welding together. So there's also a tziruf to put things together. Lechaber v'lekasher. Kol hakoichos v'oilamos habruim metukanim u'musudarim. Kefi hakavana ve'aratzon ha'elyon baruch hu. According to the divine will, to create a unified world. Umamele gam beis Yisrael am sgula yitachadu b'shem ha'miyuchad yitbarach lechelko v'nachalato. So the Jewish people, Am Skula, will also be one and unified, b'shem Hashem, to be God's people, to be Chelko v'Nachalaso. The Jewish people will be recognized for their unity and their connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Sherak al zeh tachlis ba'u kol hamitzvot ve'avodah hakadosha kula bichlal. This is what it's all about. This is Torah and mitzvahs. It is to purify and to connect people to themselves, to their spiritual source, the Jewish people to one another, and Am Yisrael to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which will bring more divinity and divine energy into the universe. This is the intent of Chazal, that lo nitne mitzvahs ela litzaref behen et habrios, that it's a purification and unification process going on through the fulfillment of our mitzvahs. That's beautiful, and that's really impactful, and something we can relate to, I think, about, again, unity and purification and connecting with our true selves and with God and with other Jews through our fulfillment of the mitzvahs. That rings, I think, clear and true to us, despite all the deep philosophical, prefaces that we had to get through to get here. At the end, we get to something we do understand, that we're doing mitzvahs to connect up to our spiritual source. So now we're getting back to where we started in this Shaa'r, which is about what does it mean, Baruch Atah Hashem, blessing God. Zehu inyan bracha lo yitbarach b'kol brachas ve'atfilos. So now this is the essence of blessing God. Sheperushohu. Remember, we defined bracha as tosefes v'riboy, not as shevach v'tehillah, not as praising God, but as somehow augmentation, addition, right? So tosefes v'riboy mamish, k'mashma'o kenal. Shezel ritzoyno yizbarach. Mitam kamus ito yizbarach. We don't know maybe the reason for this, but this is how he set it up. His unknowable self is connected to the visible and knowable world through these pathways which are impacted by what we do. Shenitaken v'niyached al yedei abrachois v'atfilos hakoichois v'oilamois el yoinim. So through our brachos and our prayers and our mitzvahs, we are connecting up these supernal powers and influx of energy. Shiu muchanim v're'uyim lekabel shefas kedushas or elyon. So we are sort of preparing the vessels to receive more light, and we're bringing that light into the vessels. Lahamshich u'lohoisif b'hem kedushas ha'or. More of the sanctity of the great light. V'rav brachos mi'atzmuso yizbarach hamischaber eleim umispashet b'soicham. So again, these are important words, that from God's essence, right, atzmuso yizbarach, which connects with these supernal vessels, whether it's the spheroids or whatever else we're talking about, that there's this hispashtus and hischabrus, this connection and extension of godliness into more finite things, and that the amount and the degree to which it flows in there is affected by the deeds of man. Memela yushpa zeh tosefes bracha ve'kedusha. And so this augmentation of kedusha that's coming into the system, and this great kedusha, it also affects the Jewish people and even the individual. Gam al am skula shegarmu v'sivevu lekol hakavod hazeh. So as this divine energy is flowing from the infinite source of energy into these, to some degree, finite vessels, there's this augmentation and there's this illumination and there's this energy and light coming in and a purification process, and that's happening in the heavens, and it's sort of invisible and undetectable to us, but it's also affecting us. It affects us in our personal lives and in the life of Klal Yisrael, and it defends us against our enemies, and it makes the crops grow and protects them from pestilence. It does all these wonderful things for us on all these different levels. So that's what the Torah and mitzvahs do. That's sort of where their effect is very high, but it also has an expression down here below. And so he has a few examples of this. There's this famous Gemara in Brachos, when Rabbi Shmuel Kohen Gadol went lifnai v'lifnim, he went into the Kodesh HaKodashim, And Hashem said these, fascinating words. He said, Yishmol b'ni barcheni. Kaviyachol, God asked for a bracha from the Kohen Gadol. V'zeh she'amar Rabbi Shmuel k'shebikesh hu yizbarach me'ito Yishmol b'ni barcheni. And so what did Rabbi Shmuel say? Let's look at it carefully. Yiratzoin sheyichbashu rachamecha eskascha v'yigoylu rachamecha al midoisecha v'tisnoyeg im banecha b'midas harachamim v'tikanes lehem lifnim mishura sadin. So this is really interesting. These are key words, Yehi Ratzon. It should be the divine will. So you have a man, a Kohen Gadol, blessing God because God is interacting with him and he's asking for a bracha. And so he gives him a bracha that within the divine midos, the midas hachesed, the midas harachamim should overcome the midah of kas and the midah of din. And Hashem should have a ratzon, have a will to enter lifnim mishur sadin with the Jewish people. And God appreciated that bracha. Okay, so that's fascinating that on this supernal realm of energy going back and forth within the Godhead, as it were, that man and his brachas can have impact. And God asked for that bracha and received that bracha, and that bracha had impact, which will affect, again, the hischabrus and the hispashtus, the connection and the extension, and that will trickle down into this world, and it'll affect Rabbi Shmuel Kohen Gadol, and it'll affect every Jew. We'll all be in a situation of God's mercy overcoming his anger, and of Hashem entering into with us lifnim mishur sadin, beyond the letter of the law, in a more loving and forgiving way. So it's very, very beautiful. And it, to me, it's credible. It's credible that, the Gemara in Brachas tells you something, God asks for a bracha from the Kohen Gadol, and you're sort of like, what? Like, does that make any sense? It's like upside down. And here he's saying something, and what he's saying to me makes sense. So again, the Kohen Gadol is talking to one level of God and saying, Yehi Ratzon, it should be the will of the unknowable and of the Ein Sof Baruch Hu, of Atzmus Yisbarach. It should be his will to send this energy in a constructive pathway of rachamim and likanes lifnim mishur sadin. So that's how I understand it. So I like that.
It's amazing that he made a statement like that, and it's amazing that God seemed to appreciate it. I find both of these things stunning.
I agree.
Because in a sense, he's compartmentalizing and, messing around with the whole unity thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost the image of God fighting off its Yetzer Hara, like the part of him who wants to be angry,
Uh-huh.
I wouldn't give him anger management instructions. You could plead for mercy, but if you have to have him battling out inner conflicts in the cosmos, I don't know. I think that was very daring. Caught him in a good day.
It is very daring, and I'll tell you where we can't go on this. We can't go to Shtei Reshuyos, right? That there are two different domains. There's the good God and the bad God, right? And again, that's Zoroastrianism. That's where the Persians and the Babylonians were. There's the Hormes and Hormin. There's this war between the good God and the bad God. I mean, even the Wizard of Oz. Are you a good witch or are you a bad witch? Right? So we know that duality. And the halachas of Shulchan Aruch from the Gemara and the Mishnayos are very careful not to say moidim and not to say shma, because it's nishma kashtei reshuyot, as if there's two different domains above. And that's why we mention Yoitzer Or Uvoirei Choshech, and in the evening we say Mariv Aravim and Umevi Yom Umavir Yom Umevi Loila. We're Mazkir Midas Yom Balayla Midas Laila B'Yom to show that Ein Shtei Reshuyot. There's no foil to God. There's no antagonist that is on an equal par. He may be created a Satan. There could be an angel who's a prosecutor. And there are midos, right? And Steve has pointed that out, that we're talking here about midas hadin or midas agvura, whatever. But that's like where we can't go. That there's shtei reshuyos chas v'shalom. Hashem is one, and ultimately, a total unity. And yet, Yishmol b'ni barcheni, and he gives him this bracha, she tikanes sheyichbeshu rachamecha eskascha, that midas harachamim should overcome midas hadin. And Hashem appreciated that bracha. And the Gemara, sort of finishes on a halachic note. Says, what's this whole story about? Like, what's the nafkamina? And the Gemara says, Shelo tehe birkas hedyet kal be'inecha. That even if anybody gives you a bracha, you should always appreciate it and respect it, because here's God accepting a bracha from a mere mortal man. So that's how the Gemara finishes it. Okay, so now like we've seen many places before, after he says a provocative, Kabbalistic formulation, then he tries to bring lots of bibliographic support for it, saying, I'm not making this stuff up, right? This comes from the Zohar here and there. So look in the Zohar, it says, Achalta v'savato beirachta es Hashem Elokecha, v'amari gadol koyach birkas hamazon shemoisiv koyach beracha b'pamal yishal mala. L'chein Amru Razal in the 6th parak of Brachas in the Zohar, Kol ha'oichel ve'einu mevarech, if you eat and you don't make a bracha, Nikra Gazlan, you're called a thief or a robber. Why? Shenemar Goizel Aviv ve'imo, ve'ein Aviv elo Kadosh Baruch Hu. So what's the pshat? What have you stolen? You've stolen ki hu goizel umonea meho'ilamois shefas habracha ve'akedusha shayetzarich lahashpia bahem al yedei birchato. It's a beautiful idea. It's a hard Gemara that if you, let's say, eat an apple and you don't make a boyer priya eitz, okay? So, brachas are derabanan. What did you really do so wrong? So the Gemara says you've stolen. And from the Gemara, it seems like, right, it says, Lashem ha'aretz umlo'ah. And another pasuk says, Hashem hashemayim va'aretz natan lifnei adam. So who does the aretz belong to, God or man? And the Gemara says, Lo kasha halifnei bracha hala'acharei bracha. So the bracha is like a form of a kinyan, an acquisition of the apple. You're acquiring the permission or the ownership of the apple to eat it by making a bracha on it. So if you don't make a bracha, kavayachol, you stole the apple. And that's the beginning, that's this pashib shat of kol ha'oichel ve'einu mevarach nikra gazlan, shenemar goizel aviv ve'imo. And so Rashi says, aviv is Kadosh Baruch Hu and imo is Knesset Yisrael. You've stolen from God and you've stolen from the Jewish people. And the Nefesh HaHaim is going the next step. What have you stolen? And he says, not the apple. You've stolen from God and essentially from all mankind and everybody else in the world. You've been monea, you've prevented the world from getting an influx of divine energy and sanctity. You were monea me'oilamos, shefas habracha ve'kedusha, that would have come down through the bracha. And even then through eating the apple, making a bracha and eating an apple bring down divine influx and hischabrus and hispashtus. So if you eat the apple without the bracha, you are missing out. You're leaving cards on the table. So you're failing to be mashpia and to cause tosefis v'riboy of kedusha into this world. So that's a beautiful and really deep Kabbalistic shot in the Gemara Brachas. V'chein kol mikros, we have a lot of barchi nafshi es Hashem, right? In Kuf Gimel, Kuf Dalet, and Kuf Hey, you have barchi nafshi es Hashem, and the Gemara talks about it. Baruch atah Hashem Elokei Yisrael, kol ki yoytze bo hakol hu al zeh ha'inyan. It's talking all about this inyan, about giving a blessing to God's connection to the universe, bringing more godliness into our world. Umitzad ritzoni is baruch lischaber el habriya al zenemar ha'avoida tzorech gavoa. Okay, so I have a little more time, so I'm beginning the next parak. We're in Shaa'r base parak Hey. Omnam lahavin ikaro shel inyan atosefes v'ribui baracha be'olamos hayidei ma'aseh adam umahut ha'inyan tzorech ha'olamos lezeh. To go further in understanding the essence of this augmentation, this increase through the deeds of man. Hinei Razal Amru, Hani Chamisha Barchi Nafshi, Keneged Mi Amran David. It says Barchi Nafshi 5 times. Why did David say it 5 times? And the Gemara says, Lo Amran El Keneged Kodesh Baruch Hu Keneged Anishama. Ma Kodesh Baruch Hu Malei Kol Ha'olam Af Anishama Malei Kol Haguf. The Gemara makes parallels between the relationship of our soul to our body and Hashem to the world. Okay? Just like our soul fills our body, so Hashem fills the world. Okay, right? Ma Kadosh Baruch Hu malei kol ha'olam, af neshama malei kol haguf. V'chein amru vayikra Rabbah, and elsewhere, Midrash Tehillim, Tikkunim, Moshi Bi'er, Ayin here and there, etc. So he's going to talk about this. Okay. Okay, here he walks it back a little bit. Don't think it's exactly a perfect mashal. Al yitech chas v'shalom haroya divreim shenim shal doim mashal chas v'shalom. Ki bemet ein aroch v'dimyon b'neihem b'shum oifen. They're not the same. Kimavur b'zohar. Mikremali divrakasev al timyuni umi tidamyun kael v'gam kol mi she einei seichel lo yavin she eich efshar likaf dimyon mi'anivroim elabaris baruch shmo v'lo himshilu zal atzmus haneshama la'atzmus haboire. You can't really compare the soul to God. Rak ledavar zeh, only in a certain respect. She'af she'aneshama hi koyach nivra me'ito yitbarach. The neshama is a creation, it's a spiritual creation of God. Im kol zeh I efshar lahasig atzmusa lechanot la shum toar u'pu'ula im lo mitzad hischabrusa leguf. What can you say? How could you point out to me the existence of your neshama, right? You really can't. Your neshama is ethereal, it's spiritual. You can't capture it in any way whatsoever, except through its connection to your body. So, Mikol Shekena Boris Barach She'ein Lahasigo Rak Mitzad Hischabruso Lo'ilamois. So the same thing, God is unfathomable, except through his connection to the world. So both the neshama and God are difficult to relate to, but they're related to things that we do know. Our neshama is palpable as being the life force within our body. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu is discernible by giving life to the universe. So again, the soul and God are different, but they have certain similarities, and that's what Chazal are using in this mashal for. V'gam hi notenet. God cannot be compared to any creation. The highest of the high. The Kinyan Akasov Yikarahim Pninim Ba'af She'ein Dimyon Ba'aruch Bein Torah Kedoisha B'Pnimim. So again, there's no true comparison to God. God is incomparable. The Torah is also incomparable, and yet the Torah is compared to pninim, which are pearls. So is Torah like pearls? No, the Torah is infinitely more valuable and more special than pearls. There's no comparison or equivalence between the Holy Torah and pearls. But and that's why the pasuk even says kol chafatzecha lo yishva ba. Nothing could be equivalent to it. And yet, in order to poetically and to linguistically talk about these things, whether we're talking about the Torah or we're talking about God, we do need to make comparisons in order to impart certain lessons about them. So this is what it says here. in Rosh Hashanah. Kol ha-partzufim mutarim chutz mi-partzuf Adam. The rabbi said in Rosh Hashanah, in Avodah Zarah, in a Brisa, you're allowed to make pictures, depictions of all faces, except human faces. Umefarish taimed ichsiv lo tasun iti, lo tasun oisi. Became Luchal Bezor Yisro Ayin Sham. So he's going now to the idea, he's talking more about the Tselem Elokim, about the comparison between human structure and form somehow bears a similarity to the divine. And therefore, it would be a chutzpah to make like a human figure because you are, as it were, depicting God, and that you can't do that. So he's quoting, Amr Ksiv ki yesh adam she'amlo b'chochma, Amr Yudin gadol koichan shel neviim, shemedamim sura li yoitzra, shenemar b'shma kol adam, benulai, Amr Islan karya oichran de mechaver yoter min dein, shenemar ve'al dmus akisei dmus kemare adam. So this is a pasuk in the Ma'aseh Merkava of Yechezkel, and it says sitting on the form of the throne is demut kimar'e adam, that upon what looked like a throne was what looked like appearance of a man. And in Midbar Rabbah, chochmas adam toar panav, gadol koichan shel neviim shemedamin demus gvura shel mala letzuras adam. V'kein hi b'tanchuma parshas chukas. Lichayra yifla, it's a pele. V'chiel mi tidamyun, how can you compare God to man? Omnama inyan k'mashikosav shekol hasagatenu kaviyachol oto yitbarach shmo hu rak mitzad hischabruso yisbarach la'olamois. We're back to that same place. We're not talking about God's unknowable self, because you can't compare it to anything. There's no meaningful comparison. But if we're talking about God who decided to create the universe, he created it in his own image. And so the image of the universe and the image of man somehow sheds light on how we can understand or picture God to a certain degree. Seder matzav oelamois ve'akoichos kulam elyonim v'tachtoinim yachad b'klal misudarim kaviyachol b'chol prateim kitavnit komat adam. So if we took all the worlds that exist in the whole universe, somehow it stacks up like a person, okay? The Sidur kol pirke evarav, his limbs, his sinews, evarav v'gida v'kol prate inyanim, shebo v'his achdusam, and how they're all unified into a single organism, a single organization, a single entity. His achdusam echad b'chaveira, how they're all connected. Shehu koilalam yachad b'soichoi kol hakoichois v'oilamois. Savnu, we already talked about this in Shaa'r Aleph. So I think that's where I'm going to leave it tonight. That the whole world is like Shaa'r Koma. V'hu inyana Shaa'r Koma. Hanizkar b'divrayim zal b'midrashim. There's something called Shaa'r Koima. And look in the Arizal here and there. Because of Sham Shezeh Remez HaKosuv V'yivra Elokim Es HaAdam B'tzalmo B'tzelem Elokim. Everybody knows that, that God created man in his image, and you don't really understand what does that mean. What does it mean man is created in the image of God? And here he's giving us a little bit of insight. And he says, look in Sha'ar Tzelem, B'Sha'ar Tziro Ilamos, Abiyah Sham, that all the universe God created somehow B'tzuras HaAdam. And again, we're speaking about God and his connection to the universe that he created. It's B'tzuras Adam, called Shaa'r Koima. And beyond that, there's God's unknowable self. But he has invested of his unknowable self into this creation, his chabruso, his pashtuso. And that's essentially as high as we can get. And so that's the focal point of our prayers, our mitzvahs, and our davening. Okay, I'm going to stop there, and we are going to wish everybody a good Keben Shtior. Ksima Toiva. David, take care. Have a great year. And we'll see everybody. We'll get together next week. It'll be Motzei Tzom Gedalia, but we should be able to get together. So take good care, everybody. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye-bye.